The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life, except for sometimes, like this particular episode, where it's just you and me. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, recently known as Victoria, BC, Canada. And welcome to my final episode of the Witch's New Year Retreat. It's a podcast mini-series to honor the season of the witch and the annual Wheel of the Year festival known as Samhain. I'm excited to share today's show with you because there's almost a little bit of scary Halloween energy in this episode, which is not a note I usually hit on this show. But it's just like a super brief interlude where we explore fear and confronting fear. And if you enjoy being scared shitless, then I can wholeheartedly recommend you take the learning from this episode with you out into some scary cemetery at night or something like that. As you likely know by now, I have a new book coming out in January 2025. It's called Spells for the Apocalypse: Practical Magic for Turbulent Times. I'm going to be honest with you, this is not the book that I pitched to my publisher. This was not the book I was dying to write, but the book I really wanted to write, and the book that my agent also thinks is the book that's kind of like inside me that the world needs to read. The book that we actually pitched was not what my publisher wanted. And so based on my first book's contract, my publisher had right of first refusal on my second book, and they passed on it. Actually, didn't feel good, but then my editor came back to me and said, we're not really wanting to publish this genre so much anymore. We feel like we're pretty saturated in our catalog with that genre, but we really do want to do an extension of The Spirited Kitchen. Like, our team would really love a book from you that's about magic and spells, that's not a cookbook, just like a handbook of practical magic. Would you be willing to pitch us a concept? So I talked to my agent about it, and she was like, there are a lot of really good reasons to say yes to this, even though we both really believe in this other book you want to do about contact nutrition. But, there's something to be said about a publisher who really wants to work with you and kind of make you almost like a bit of a house author. Why would you say no to that, in a way? And then I consulted with my astrologer, Eliza Robertson. You may remember her. She's been on the show a few times. She's a key member at the Chani app. She's former Numini. And she assured me that it's written in my stars. It's in my chart that I will be doing publishing work for a while, at least another 8 to 10 years or so. I have more pieces of work to put out. So there was no urgency around the book I really want to do. So basically, it was determined that I have time to write like a sophomore follow-up to The Spirited Kitchen. That's not going to pull me too off course or anything. So I was like, okay, I'll pitch some ideas. I definitely have more witchcraft books and practical magic books in me. So I sent over a one-page pitch sheet to my editor with 5 different titles, 5 that each had different themes, different areas of magical practice, a few lines describing the features, the benefits, main messages, and target audience of each. And one of these ideas was basically just a repackaging of all of the best practices, all of the sort of standard exercises that I take people through in different courses of the Numinous Network. So my favorite rituals, practices, therapeutic interventions, I just turn that into a handbook idea. So I narrowed all of them down to 13 rituals and 13 remedies. So practices we could do, qualities within ourselves we can cultivate, things like that for turbulent times. So basically, all the trauma recovery and nervous system regulation stuff that I think are important collapse skills and that I deliver in the Numinous Network as a form of spiritual, devotional, animistic practice. I just packaged it all up and titled it Spells for the Apocalypse. And my editor came back and said, okay, the team loves this concept, but they're a bit nervous about the title, so they'll probably want to change that. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, the title is the best part. The title, this book is going to sell based on the title alone. I thought it was gold. So I really pitched that, like, no, that should be the title. I was willing to work with like the subtitle a little bit, but anyway, I'm glad that in the end they trusted me and is going to be great. It's going to be a really cute, like a little gift size book, actually. That's also what they wanted. They wanted something like small and short and like giftable. Though I think this is definitely going to be in the like little treat for me kind of category of gift book. Like I think people definitely could buy it for friends, but I think people are going to be buying it for themselves. It's quite pretty. It has gold foil on the cover, which is like something I really hoped for the Spirited Kitchen, but they didn't want to do it for that book because, of course, it's a cookbook. They wanted something like a more wipeable cover. Makes sense. But second time's a charm. And so they went for it. It also, so my editor at the time, like for the Spirited Kitchen, I had done a whole bunch of doodles, like little sketches that were going to go inside as part of the layout and cover design. And the designer, the interior layout and the cover of the Spirited Kitchen decided just didn't really fit the feel of the book. So those were on the cutting room floor. And my editor said, I'd really like to use those sketches. I would like for this book, even though it's going to have gold foil and be, cute and gifty, I actually would like to have a bit more of your like homespun kind of feel. We don't want it to just seem like it's pablum. We don't want it to seem like there isn't real thought in this, even though it's very pretty. We want it to have some depth. So that feels like a little bit, I don't know, kind of weird and vulnerable. I was nervous about it for the Spirited Kitchen anyway. I was like, who wants to see my doodles? And then when they said they weren't going to use it, I was like quite relieved. And I had my kid, who's like an incredible artist and character designer, illustrator, writer. Like I am the parent of an extremely talented artist. And they had helped me with like shading and trying to digitize these sketches and things like that. So I was like a little disappointed that I wasn't going to get to use them. Anyway, they're in spells. And it's kind of nice because it's like a subtle reference to a life made by hand, and a hand that's humbled by the fact that like my vision for the project, my vision for the art even exceeds my competence. Like I'm not an incredibly talented artist. They're just my doodles, and how I saw them in my head is definitely not how they turned out. Because like I'm just a human being and I'm not an artist variety of being. I'm just a doodler variety. But I like how humanizing it is, especially in this, like now we're in the AI art era. Such a huge change just from 2022 to now. But I like how this one small design choice kind of stands in resistance to perfectionism and AI and those aspects of capitalism that I don't love. Anyway, so the book is organized as quite short chapters that would take like 5 to 10 minutes to read. And each chapter has a recommended ritual or practice. One of the executive editor, like the main editor at my publisher, said, okay, so if I'm getting this right, it's like 13 calamities and then 13 remedies for those. And if you do a ritual and a remedy each month, well, then you've got 13 moons, and this book becomes a year-long program of spiritual practice for collapse. There's actually 3 parts total to the book. Part 1 is like the theories, the philosophies, and the evidence for why these approaches work and how taken together, like why this approach, where it's part magic, part self-help, is a collapse skill. And then the second part is the 13 calamities, let's say, that you would encounter when you go through like a personal or a collective collapse. So a personal collapse is like you personally are bereaved, or you get divorced or become sick or disabled or lose your job. Any of those would constitute like a personal sense of collapse, where just everything in your life just feels like it's falling apart. Collective collapse is where we are together, we are grappling with like fascism, genocide, climate chaos, like the big things, right? So the chapters are named after the calamities. So that way you can just look up the symptom you're experiencing and then just like open to that chapter. And there's a ritual designed specifically for that. And these rituals are based in my training as a somatically based, attachment oriented trauma recovery practitioner. So the first 13 chapters are about anxiety, burnout, confusion, despair, disquiet, dread, fear, grief, loss, overwhelm, predicament, rage, and stagnation. So if you feel any of those things right now, there's a whole chapter for you, including a spell and a ritual to support you in that experience. Then part 3 is all about these remedies, where you could think of them as like remediation magic, things that you can do to counteract calamity. So each chapter, again, includes like a ritual or a practice you can undertake to cultivate more resilience and to face turbulent times. So the remedies are acknowledgement, appreciation, balance, celebration, connection, conservation, movement, nurturance, pronking, protection, renewal, and wholeness. And if you want to know what pronking is, you will have to buy the book, or you can join us in the Numinous Network and take my course, Contact Nutrition 101. It's a term of art in trauma recovery. So I will admit, I really liked the book, but it was kind of like the water in which I swim. I was just like, okay, well, I'm glad that they're enthused about it. Here's what I can put together. The thing though that made me like really start to kind of give myself over to the charm of this book were the blurbs and things that I got from my advanced readers. So when you write a book, your publisher will want you to reach out. Well, they will reach out on your behalf, but they want to know, like, so who are the fellow authors kind of in your niche who would want to read this and might say something nice, so we can put their little blurb on the outside. Those are those like endorsements on the outside and inside covers of your book. So, I got like a lot of people that I sent it to, and I was like, oh, some of these folks might like it. Some of them might find it's like a little too, I don't know, short, small, gifty. I don't know. You don't know if somebody's going to say something nice. So when they started trickling back in and people were like sending me personalized notes, because they come back to your editor, like they weren't coming back to me. My editor would kind of forward it along, or I'd like open up my Instagram and there would be like a whole bunch of voice notes from someone. And they were just saying like really lovely, genuinely glowing things. It was like really moving to have fellow authors that I highly respect and practitioners that I deeply admire who would say, like, Carmen, this is such a friendly and accessible and tender book. And yeah, then I was like, I better go read this book again. And then I was like, you know what? This is a really good book. I quite like this book. And then there was a very special thing that happened. And if you listen to my episode with Colette Barron-Reed, or if you have been in the Numinous Network, been in the Numinous School, you know that I have used her Enchanted Map deck for 15 years now as the deck that I teach with when I teach intuition development. And so Colette and I have like become friends, and we like text sometimes and things. So that's like, this is wild to me. Anyway, Colette Barron-Reed wrote this like, okay, I'm going to say it because I love her so much. It's like very over the top, I have to say. It's like a little bit embarrassing, but it's so good that I was like, okay, I guess it's a good book. Anyway, so this is what Colette Barron-Reed wrote about Spells for the Apocalypse. Carmen Spaniola has yet again penned a masterpiece, a book steeped in intentionality, conscience, humility, and courage. But don't let the word book fool you into believing this is to be read as such. No, this book is to be a living journey, a brutally honest yet compassionate companion as you walk through this ever chaotic landscape of life, unmaking and remaking yourself in ways you're sure to be amazed. Although the modern use of the word represents total destruction, in Greek, apocalypse means revelation, the revealing of that which is hidden, secret, apocalypsis, which means lifting of the veil. This is exactly what this book is for. Experience it as an adventure, be mindful and walk slowly, anchoring in the rituals with discernment, allowing your curiosity to lead you, and you will be led by this magic to discover your own. What? Like, that's I don't know if I should I'm like laughing and tearing up. That's okay, so that's too much. That's overstating it. It's just a book. But but that's what people are that's what she wanted to say about it. It was like wild. Asha Frost, who also has been on this show, who wrote You Are the Medicine, just like an absolutely beautiful soul. Asha Frost wrote, thoughtful, compelling, and deeply nourishing, Spells for the Apocalypse had my indigenous bones and blood vibrating with resonance. This book is a gift for all who are holding a vision of hope and healing for ourselves and the next 7 generations. Okay. So I was very touched. I was very touched. Okay, there's other ones I can read, but I'm just not going to because it's too much. It was like they're very sweeping blurbs. I was really blown away. I've never read stuff like this about my work before. So I kind of had to like smarten up and really respect this book again and be like, oh yeah, no, this is good. This is really good. This is all my work in one place and knitted together in a really beautiful way. And it's really impacting people that I respect in a good way. So I am very proud of this book because I'm very proud of my work and it is a compendium of that work. So anyway, I just didn't expect people to be quite so effusive about it. But I guess the other thing I'll just say, I was just about to pivot and move on, but I've lived my life by this William Morris quote. The quote is, have nothing in your home that you don't know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. And I actually really do know and believe this book to be both. So I hope that when I do launch the pre-order campaign, this isn't it. This isn't it yet. I gotta wait until the book arrives. I have it in my hands. I can like see it, feel it, get a sense for how it wants to be debuted and presented to the world. Once the book tells me it's ready, I will tell you, but it's not coming yet. But when it's ready, I hope you will buy like several copies because it is made to be a giftable book. But more than that, I made it to be a lifeline. So, okay. Okay, now I'm making myself cry. Okay, so there's 2 chapters that right now just feel, I don't know, I feel called, or they are telling me that these are the chapters that need to be shared right now. And I can just share parts of it. So the chapter is called Fear, and the subtitle is Calling in the Dark. Now, this was one of the core rituals that I teach when I'm leading Wilderness Quest, and longtime listeners of the podcast will remember when I had my former teacher, Sparrow Hart, on the podcast back in 2014, talking about Quest and talking about this ritual, because at the time, I was actually mixing it up with another one. Anyway, when I lead Wilderness Quest, they're like a 12-day journey to the backcountry. And the participants for the days in the middle are 4 days and nights solo on a mountain with just a tarp, water, sleeping bag, first aid kit. And the purpose is to have a meaningful spiritual encounter with nature and with the self. Now, when people are going out on this like 12-day quest, or they're asking me what we do, the main question is like, what are you doing out there by yourself for 4 days? And the answer is like this: we do rituals that help us confront or just deal with the intensity of life. And I will say, though, that most of the rituals are like quite gentle and nurturing, actually. Many of the rituals are just rituals of like survival out there. But, a lot of them are about contemplation, self-love and nurturance, and like kind of reparenting the inner child. They're really designed to help people orient towards safeness, security, self-care, etc., even when conditions are really challenging or Spartan. But some of the rituals, like this one, help us develop strength, to stand strong, to look squarely at life, almost to say, like, try me, So this is a heavy-duty ritual. I don't actually recommend you do this ritual when you're feeling fragile. And so if you're feeling up for it, this is a ritual you would do at night. So the basic structure of the ritual is like this. You delineate sacred space by either drawing a circle on the ground or making one with rocks. And then when you're ready, you step into the circle and you sit or lie down inside the circle, and you're going to stay there until sunrise. So you're in the circle for the whole rest of the night. And so after you've taken some time to ground yourself, maybe call in like supportive ancestors or allies, then you would invite your fear to come and visit you and sit with you in the circle. And then after you've opened up that invitation, the door's open, then you just wait. And essentially, there's a lot of other instruction too, but essentially you wait until you feel fear, until you start to feel afraid. Now, some people don't feel afraid. They just they'll fall asleep. But very often they'll have like a bad dream that alerts them that fear has come, or they'll just be a little restless. But most people only have to acknowledge their fear to invoke the muse, right? Fear will arrive, and they'll know that fear has arrived by their vigilance, by their shortness of breath. Maybe they're scanning the dark, thinking they see things move. They're trying to discern shapes, trees look like monsters, that kind of thing. So they'll just start to feel kind of skittish, right? Heart beating faster, that kind of thing. Maybe you're even feeling it a little bit right now. And maybe you don't mind because it's scary season, but maybe it gives you the creeps. So if it does give you the creeps, then your ritual has begun. So I'm going to read an excerpt from Spells for the Apocalypse now. So we'll start at step number 5. When you sense your fear has arrived with a shift of the energy, either in the room or in your body, ask them, what do you want from me? Now, trust me when I say that fear can be vicious. Don't be surprised if without so much as a hello, your fear says, I want you to feel worthless, or some other wincingly mean-spirited thing. As my Irish friend says, fear is a right arsehole. Tell your fear, no, try again. Your fear might say, I want you to be small, smaller and smaller until you disappear. You just say, no, I will not. Try something else. This could go on a long time. Do not give in to fear. Hold firm against the meanness. Fear, I want you to suffer. You, absolutely not. What else? Fear, I want you to be alone and outcast. You, fuck you. Anything else? Fear, I want you to feel embarrassed about your body. You, no, you jerk. You keep going like this until there is something reasonable that your fear wants. Perhaps your fear wants you to feel guilty about all the times you put work before your health or friends or family. Fear of rejection would be a reasonable consequence of neglecting a relationship. For this, we ought to give fear its due. Step 6. Ask fear what it would accept as respectful acknowledgement for the role it plays in keeping you safe and in alignment with your values. You might say, okay, fear. Fear, okay, I will prioritize my loved ones ahead of work in the following ways. I will make a standing calendar appointment for myself to send a hello once a week. I will mark my calendar with the birthdays, wedding anniversaries, and death dates of my loved ones, and I'll make sure to reach out on or before those times. I will reward myself every time I set a boundary at work in favor of my relationships. One caveat: don't promise anything you can't give. You cannot cheat the devil, and fear can be a real shit sometimes. If you don't respect it, it comes back worse. Do not disrespect your fear by making promises you won't keep. Keep things simple, doable, and sincere. Most importantly, don't give fear anything without getting something of value in return. It's a fair negotiation or no deal. Step 7. Now begins the negotiation. Ask fear for what you want in return. Sidebar: standing up to your fear. After I signed the contract for my first book, I spent several months frozen with fear, unable to write. I did the calling in the dark ritual. My fear said it wanted me to die of humiliation. It wanted me to be pilloried on social media. It wanted me to feel stupid. Naturally, this was unworkable, but I agreed to hire a sensitivity reader to look at my manuscript to make sure there wasn't anything in there deserving of strong repudiation or that might really hurt people. I vowed to stay firm with my editor about keeping parts that felt important to me in terms of moving social justice forward. I committed to more sessions with my therapist to dig into the roots of self-confidence that's dependent on outward success and other people's evaluation of me. I promised to invite fear to a vigil once a month where I would grieve for all the unwelcome parts of me that never found belonging in my family of origin. For half an hour once a month, I would acknowledge that my fear came from a reasonable place, and I let myself feel afraid of being cast out of my social community. In exchange, I asked my fear to shut the fuck up and let me write the rest of the time. And here we are, book number 2, written swiftly and with ease. No fear. Okay, so there's more to that chapter in terms of like wrapping that chapter up in a good way and ensuring you have some good aftercare after a big ritual like that. But for now, I'm going to segue into a remedy, almost like a protection ritual you could do to restore your sense of possibility in bleak times. Again, I can't share the entire ritual yet, but I can share the beginning. And I can also share that this ritual is inspired by the work of James Hillman, who has been such a primary influence on how I regard hope in turbulent times. Like, without getting off on a tangent here, I'll just say Hillman is a Jungian therapist, and he's done a ton of stuff, but for me, he stands out because he was brave enough to condemn certain forms of hope. And he reminded us that in Greek mythology, hope was one of the ills of the world that was trapped in Pandora's box. So hearing him speak with some skepticism about, the tendency to emphasize hope in a therapeutic context, ironically, that gave me hope that there were therapists out there who would go deeper and who could handle grappling with collapse without pathologizing that as depression or a mental illness or a mood disorder. So I was thinking about Hillman a lot as I wrote this book. This ritual is also really influenced by somatic practitioner Philip Shepard's body of work, which he refers to as radical wholeness. And finally, this ritual is very much a product of my having read The Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler almost 15 years ago now. This chapter is called Wholeness and subtitled The Oakness of the Acorn. And it opens with a quote: "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely bear what is necessary, but love it." That's Friedrich Nietzsche. The concept of amor fati, which can be translated as love of one's fate, has been linked to philosophers such as Epictetus, Friedrich Nietzsche, and James Hillman. Amor fati proposes that you take the whole of your life and love it hard, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this concept marries well with James Hillman's acorn theory. Acorn theory is an update on Aristotle's idea of entelechy, the drive of all living things towards their true form. Acorn theory holds that each person bears a uniqueness that asks to be lived, and that is already present before it can be lived. It is suffused with the spirit of amor fati in its ardent embrace of the possibilities already inherent in your existence. Within the acorn is encoded everything it needs to know to become the oak tree. It may not land in the best conditions, but that is out of the acorn's control, and it does not diminish the acorn's true oakness. Even if it never gets the chance to fully become the oak tree, the acorn is whole. The oakness of the acorn is inherent. If we take amor fati, loving your life, the whole kit and caboodle, and we marry it with acorn theory, this idea that all potentials of you are already present, we begin to approach the notion of wholeness. Quote, it's all there at once. When you look at a face before you, at a scene outside your window, or a painting on the wall, you see the whole gestalt. All the parts are present themselves simultaneously. It doesn't matter whether the painter put the reddish blotches in last or first, the gray streaks as afterthoughts. What you see is exactly what you get all at once. So too, the image in the acorn. You are born with a character. It is given, a gift, as the old stories say, from the guardians upon your birth. James Hillman. This remedy is an invitation to feel into the nature of your wholeness, and as much as possible, wholly embrace yourself and your life as is, where is. Supplies: 8 acorns, and if you can't find those, you can use 8 dried kernels of corn, grain, or other seeds. 8 slips of paper. A small vessel to hold the acorns in afterwards. Number 1, write out each of the statements below, one on each slip of paper. The whole abides in the present. The whole embraces paradox and the rhythm of tension and yielding. The whole is in touch with all parts of itself, and every part belongs. The whole cannot be known from any one perspective. The whole can be sensed. The whole thrives in mutual awareness and love. The whole is emergent. The whole is continuously renewing. I'll end it there, but that ritual continues on with another 4 to 5 steps and includes some coaching for what to do if it doesn't quite ring true for you yet. Even if it doesn't quite ring true, and there remain parts of your life that you would reject, which would be totally understandable, philosophy and practical reality are often at odds. Nevertheless, you proceed as though you regard yourself as whole. And I often lean into this notion of proceeding as though. The proceeding as though posture is great when I'm feeling doubt or uncertainty. We use it a lot in our family, especially in my marriage. Like, what if we proceed as though our marriage matters to more people than just us? What if we proceed as though our marriage matters to our entire community? What if it matters to coming generations of people we'll never even meet? What if it matters that we figure out how to do this marriage thing, given that we are so in love and given that we both really want to be married to each other. Now, my husband, Ruben, who was very far from identifying as spiritual when we first met, perhaps would still not describe himself that way. He even had, in the beginning, I would say, like a little soupçon of condescension. Like there was tolerance of my, what we used to call woo-woo stuff in the early years of our relationship. But then he had this like really important and visceral insight about my animism and witchcraft after he listened to an Indigenous elder friend of ours talk about their kinship with ravens and eagles and bears, which used to be much more prolific in the area where we live. And Ruben had this thought that like less than 200 years ago, an Indigenous person would like walk outside every day and see ravens and eagles and bears several times a day. And that if you proceed as though they're your kin, if that's what you believe, it would be like bumping into respected elders or friends on the street all day long. And he was thinking that if you kept bumping into respected elders in the street all day, you might start to feel as though the universe was trying to send you a sign or like participating in your life or collaborating with you some way. And then, as a white settler, of course, he felt a pang of sadness that he has never had that experience. That feeling of being like so surrounded by love and care and kinship. And he really wanted that. So he decided to experiment with proceeding as though the neighborhood crows were our kin. He'd always loved crows, always admired them, but decided to proceed as though they were potentially relatives or at least potentially friends, neighbors, protectors, messengers. So he started to greet the crows. And what do you know? The crows started to greet him. They would gather outside on the telephone line every day before Ruben left for work or as he left for work. And so then the greeting became like, oh, I have a little food for you, crows. And so then the crows would gather like clockwork every time Ruben left for work every day. They started to come like very regularly. And then they started to like follow him up the street to work, especially if he was late and didn't put food out. You would hear those crows and you'd hear them were quite far away. They'd make such a ruckus that he would have to turn around and come home and like grab a little offering and so on and so on. It kept getting really escalated. I encourage you to proceed as though you are whole. Proceed as though your wholeness can be sensed. Proceed as though your wholeness thrives in mutual awareness and love. In other words, other people being allowed to see it. Proceed as though the whole is continuously renewing, that whatever it is you're going through now is just part of it and it's part of your whole. There's no need to reject that part of your life. Anyway, I could go on and on, but basically, I'm expecting an advance copy of my book to arrive sometime in November. As soon as I've had a chance, as I said, to like hold it, feel it, really tune into it, see how it wants to be represented, I'll reveal it on Instagram in my newsletter. That's when I'll announce details of the pre-order bonus I'm offering. And I personally think it's going to be so good. And just so you know, I ran it past my kid who's like almost 21 and they thought it was very cool. So I think it must be very cool. The bonus involves me drawing a major arcana tarot card for you, though I'm going to take out the devil, the tower, maybe the hanged man. I'm going to take out those ones, maybe even death. I'm not afraid of the death card, but I'm not going to send the death card to someone in the mail. You know what I mean? Anyway, so the bonus is going to involve me drawing a major arcana tarot card for you and inserting it into your signed copy of Spells for the Apocalypse. And you'll have like a QR code or a link that you can go to for an audio recording of me doing like a year ahead reading, basically, with this as your card of the year to complement the collective card for everyone, which is the Hermit. I personally think that's very cool. Anyway, I'll tell you all about it when it's time. But you have to be on my newsletter to get that. Anyway, if you enjoyed this podcast mini-series, let me know. I would love your feedback. Go to the show notes in your podcast app or at numinouspodcast.com, you'll find a link to give me feedback, either leave a voicemail or a written note, or you could go to castfeedback.com/numinouspodcast, find it there. But especially just like put 5-star review in your podcast app. Like, especially if it's Apple Podcasts, that's going to make a big difference for me. Anyway, I really want to thank you all so much for listening to this show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this like asynchronous way through the Samhain season, and for our time of like sinking into the season of the witch for this little podcast retreat. I hope you had a chance to enjoy some you time as you listened. I hope that you had a chance for some trance work. And if you had a good time, please leave a 5-star review in your podcast app. That would mean the world to me. So sign up for my newsletter for the announcement about pre-ordering Spells for the Apocalypse with that very special bonus with the signed copy, tarot card, earhead reading, all that stuff. In the meantime, I really hope I'll see you in the Numinous Network soon. Sign up for my newsletter and find out more about the network at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.